Death. Few things can be considered more of an equalizer. No matter rich or poor, one day we all will die. Regardless of religious faith, the claims of near-death survivors and imaginative storytellers, hard evidence for what occurs after death eludes us. We try to fight it, we fear it, but an end is inevitable. This makes our monuments to death, cemeteries, somber places of mystery as well, where stone markers, aligned in rows, stand firmly as a way of saying, "I was here." Tales of strange events in graveyards have been told and retold worldwide, many sites gaining infamy along with those retellings. So in this episode of Seriously Strange, we will be exploring 5 such cemeteries where the bodies may rest, but the legends are very much alive and well. This episode is sponsored by SurfShark. Wait until the end of the video to learn more about them. It helps support my channel. If you could find out how you would die, would you? Off of an old country road near Cloverland, Indiana, there is a cemetery where, if you dare, some say you could do just that. Clay County Cemetery, or as it's often called, 100 Steps Cemetery, is no longer taking any new residents, and hasn't taken any in quite some time. The graves date back at least to the 1860s. They're crumbling and so worn with time that many of the markers are illegible, making it unclear just how old the site may actually be. Unlike other cemeteries with tales stemming from the people laid to rest there, the mystery here is focused around its infamous 100 steps. The most retold version of the legend states that if visitors to the cemetery were to climb the steps at night, counting each as they go, and they reach the top of the hill, the ghost of the cemetery's first caretaker would appear. The apparition is said to show a vision of how the visitors would die and then vanish into thin air. After being shown the often disturbing prediction, the shaken individuals are to descend the steps, once again counting as they go. It's claimed that the number of steps will differ. If it does, it means the prophecy will come true, though many sources will claim the opposite, that if some supernatural sleight of hand were to take place and the number differs coming down than it did going up, that you will be spared whatever grisly fate was shown to you. A number of visitors to the cemetery have decided to take up the challenge of the 100 steps and have attempted to outsmart the legend. Such things often end poorly. Those who thought themselves clever would try to go around the steps to ascend the hill. For this, a number of those people have found only punishment. It's said that anyone who does not use the steps is shoved to the ground by an unseen force. The sharp impact would cause them to stumble, often slipping back down the hill. Victims described feeling as if another person had pushed them, and many were left with a large red mark resembling a handprint. The abrasion would often take months to fade, earning it the title of the Mark of the Devil. Another variation of this legend states that the stairs also may themselves be a gateway to hell. If you were to visit today, you would find the crumbling stairs and graffitied grounds to be chilling on their own. But if you're feeling brave, or perhaps if you're a confident skeptic, start counting as you ascend the decrepit steps one night. You may end up leaving Clay County Cemetery having learned something new about yourself, something you likely would have rather not learned at all. Listed as being one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the world, La Recoleta in Buenos Aires, Argentina offers free guided tours. There are 4,691 vaults, all of which are above ground. 94 of those vaults are declared national monuments. Established in 1822, there are many famous dead interred here, including that of actors, presidents, and Nobel Prize winners. Despite the heavy presence of the living and the beauty of the cemetery, there have been more than a few strange tales to rise from the graves in La Recoleta. Eva Perón, also known as Evita, Argentina's most beloved First Lady, is the star attraction at La Recoleta Cemetery. However, she did not come to her final resting place quietly. After her death due to cervical cancer in 1952, her embalmed corpse was displayed in her former office for 2 years, before a military coup deposed her husband. The body disappeared for 16 years before it was revealed that she'd been secretly buried in Milan, Italy. Her remains were then exhumed and kept in the dining room of her former husband, Juan Perón, where he frequently opened the coffin to look at his well-preserved late wife. When Juan and his third wife, Isabel, returned to Argentina for Juan to become president again, Eva's body remained in Spain. In 1974, Juan Perón died of a heart attack, so his wife Isabel had Eva's body repatriated and buried in a crypt in the presidential palace beside Juan. This didn't go over well with Eva's family, who didn't want her lying next to Isabel when she passed away. So in 1976, a military group removed Isabel from power, and Eva's body was quietly turned over to her family. After 24 years, Eva finally reached her resting spot in the family crypt at La Recoleta Cemetery. Another interesting story is that of Salvador Maria del Carril and his wife, Tiborcia Dominguez. The story goes that Salvador, an important figure in Argentinian politics, was outraged by his wife's spending, so much so that he published a letter in newspapers letting local merchants know that he would no longer be paying for any of his wife's purchases. Tiborcia retaliated by publishing her own letter describing what a horrible man her husband was and vowing she'd never speak to him again. Although they stayed together, the rumor is she kept her promise and didn't speak to her husband for the remaining 20 years of his life. Tiborcia lived another 15 years after his death and threw many lavish parties before she died in 1898. While they're buried in the same vault, she requested that her bust look away from Salvador's bust, continuing her promise eternally to never communicate in any meaningful way with her husband again. One particularly grisly tale from La Recoleta is that of Rufina Cambaceres. She was a 19-year-old socialite who died suddenly in 1902. Doctors were called in, and supposedly all 3 doctors pronounced the young woman had died of a heart attack. A funeral was held, and Rufina was laid to rest in her casket in her family's mausoleum. A few days after the funeral, a caretaker found the lid to her coffin had appeared as though it had been disturbed just slightly, but it was still strange all the same. Fearing grave robbery, the family was alerted and ordered the lid opened. Rufina's jewelry was all in place. What they did find, however, was far more upsetting. Scratch marks covered the inside of the casket, and Rufina's hands and face were bruised and scratched from where she had evidently woken up and attempted to claw her way out frantically. The explanation given was that the young woman could have possibly suffered a cataplexic episode, where her muscles had weakened considerably as a result of a sudden emotional outburst. Yet horrifyingly enough, she had remained aware the entire time. She was just unable to move, unable to speak, unable to stop anyone from interring her alive. When she awoke in her casket, she would eventually die for real, of lack of air and the severe shock of being unable to escape her own resting place. Rufina would forever then hold the moniker of the girl who died twice. Among the many statues and beautiful monuments within La Recoleta, it would appear that even in death, many of the residents struggled to find their eternal peace. Despite being one of the largest Christian cemeteries outside of Europe and America, the South Park Street Cemetery in Kolkata, India, had a relatively short life, opening in 1767 and closing 23 years later in 1790. Poor sanitation and only rudimentary medical knowledge at the time created a high demand for a cemetery. Death was so frighteningly common that the first burial took place the very day it was opened. Even though it was claimed to be closed in 1790, some were still buried there until 1830 due to the need for burial space. There are over 1,600 graves and tombs within the 8-acre plot of land, a number of the dead being famous military and political figures of the time. Now considered to be a heritage site, it's host to many tourists. However, some visitors claim to have felt dizzy or fallen sick within the cemetery walls. The atmosphere around this particular burial site can be far from peaceful. Many of those buried at South Park Street died early in life, some from epidemics, others during military service. Some of the most notable experiences in South Park Street Cemetery occur near where tender-aged children are buried. These babies, some as young as 4 months old, are said to still be heard from time to time, their cries shattering the silence of the grave. Upon visiting the site, a group of foreigners took photos of a ghostly apparition, and suddenly many of them began to experience breathlessness. After they had left, the group then looked at the photos they had taken, which showed shadows that had not been visible when they were in the cemetery. Simply viewing the photos was enough to cause some of them to get physically ill once more. One eerie monument within South Park Street can be found covered in green moss and undergrowth. It's a small pyramid-shaped structure called the Bleeding Tomb. Legend has it that the tomb belonging to the Dennison family oozes red during monsoons for reasons unknown. Stranger still are the deaths of the family themselves. The Dennisons supposedly all died within a week of each other from unknown causes. Any other information on the family and their mysterious passing has long been lost to time. The same can be said about many of those in South Park Street Cemetery. The vague causes of death for those laid to rest adds to their air of loneliness and somber atmosphere in the site that seems not quite in line with our reality. Oakland Cemetery in Iowa is still an active grave site, openly accepting new residents. It served as the main cemetery for Iowa City since 1843. The wide expanse of its 40-acre grounds are well maintained and don't give off any sort of feeling of horror. The cemetery itself is not a source of unease. In the case of the Oakland Cemetery, the bizarre nature solely seems to surround one monument in particular, dubbed the Black Angel. The 8.5-foot tall statue was created by sculptor Mario Corbel and had been commissioned by Teresa Feldevert. The story goes that when her son had tragically died due to meningitis, the grief-stricken Teresa then moved away. After moving, she eventually married again to a man named Nicholas Feldevert. However, her new husband's tragic death followed not long after their marriage began. The distraught Teresa moved back to Iowa City and had the angel erected to watch over her family. Her late husband's ashes were placed in a repository at the base of the statue, and when Teresa died of cancer in 1924, her ashes were placed beside her husband's. However, within a few years of joining her loved ones in death is when things got strange. The once shining bronze statue took on a black patina. The darkness reportedly began in the eyes of the angel, soon spreading into dark tears that streaked its serene face. Over the years, the angel finally turned completely black, despite many attempts to restore the statue to its original bronze color. Legend has it that to even touch the angel statue is to flirt with death, as the statue is widely considered to be cursed. Many students and surrounding residents of Iowa City visit the statue, especially on Halloween night. It's considered a test of courage to touch or kiss the statue. It's said that to do so could cause you to drop dead, unless the person doing so is a virgin. The statue has allegedly claimed a number of lives, some within months of touching the statue, or perhaps even right after touching the statue. Illness, heart attack, whichever way it happens relatively soon. Pregnant women are warned to steer clear of the Black Angel, as there have been a number of claims of mothers-to-be miscarrying if they even step too close. For these reasons, even many skeptics don't wish to tempt what fate would await them should they try their luck. There are many rumors as to the cause of the statue's curse. Some say that Teresa herself was a witch. Others say that the statue was cursed as she did not remain faithful to her first husband. Whatever the cause, whether sinister or mundane, the angel's imposing presence has left many who visit Oakland Cemetery with an impression of something otherworldly, as the statue towers over them, waiting for a new visitor to extend a hand. Edinburgh, Scotland is home to what many believe to be the most haunted graveyard in the world. Known as Greyfriars Kirkyard, burials have been taking place there since the late 16th century. Its most infamous era in history has to do with a religious and political movement known as the Covenanters. After quashing a brief rebellion at the Battle of Bothwell Bridge, some 1,200 prisoners were brought to Edinburgh, and due to the lack of space, 400 of them were kept in a makeshift prison in a field to the south of Greyfriars Kirkyard. This field became known as the Covenanters' Prison, despite no real structure ever being created. The prisoners spent over 4 months outside in the graveyard awaiting trial. They had no shelter and were given a small amount of bread per day. Conditions were so inhumane that it's often described as an early concentration camp. In the end, many prisoners were executed and hundreds died of maltreatment in the form of vicious torture, intentional starvation, and exposure to the elements. The tomb of Sir George Mackenzie has long had an association with rumors of ghost activity within the Kirkyard. Nicknamed Bloody Mackenzie, he was a merciless judge who presided over the trials of the Covenanters and looked on with a sort of satisfaction as the men withered and died in the makeshift prison, a fate he would enjoy condemning them to. He would dish out unspeakable torments to those being held at Covenanters' Prison. Ultimately, he was responsible for the deaths of over 18,000 Scots. In a twist of fate, George Mackenzie was buried in the Black Mausoleum in Greyfriars, just around the corner from Covenanters' Prison. It would appear, even in death, he still intended to wreak physical harm on people. Some visitors have reported hearing noises in the graveyard, and still others have said they felt nausea while walking near the mausoleum. In 1998, a man broke into the mausoleum at night and, while trying to open Mackenzie's tomb, a sinkhole opened up beneath him and he fell into a pit containing the gruesome remains of plague victims from centuries earlier. Since then, many strange events have been linked to the Mackenzie poltergeist. Visitors have left the cemetery with bruises, scratches, and even bite marks. There have been 2 exorcisms held to rid the Black Mausoleum of Bloody Mackenzie's cruel influence. Both failed. Reportedly, one of the exorcists even died a week later from a heart attack. In 2004, 2 teenage boys were sentenced to 2 and 3 years probation for breaking into Bloody Mackenzie's tomb and cutting off his mummified head, which they proceeded to play with. One of the boys even stuck his hand inside of the head and spoke to it. The break-in caused approximately 10,000 pounds worth of damage. Not all spirits at Greyfriars Kirkyard are malevolent, however. There is a tale of Greyfriars Bobby, a loyal dog who guarded his master's grave. Legend has it that Bobby belonged to a man named John Gray. When John died, Bobby stood watch at his owner's grave for 14 years until he eventually passed as well. When the dog died in 1872, he was buried inside Greyfriars, not too far from where John's buried. Bobby's headstone at the entrance to the kirkyard was erected by the Dog Aid Society in 1981. Some claim they hear the sounds of barking even when they didn't see any dogs around, barking far too close behind them for there to be no dog in sight. With many people being rightfully afraid of an unleashed dog attacking them, it makes this particular event all the more frightening, even if, in this case, the bark is worse than the bite. It's said that Bobby is still there, loyal as always, as a good dog is, guarding the grave of his master and best friend, John Gray, from the other side. If one thing is for certain, it's that all who have life will one day have to forfeit that life. It's only truly alone, if anything. It's not a gift we're meant to keep. No matter how much science may advance, a demise will always occur. Somehow, some way, the toll will be paid. The ferryman will get his due. And if you're watching this right now, well, you're no exception. One day our time will come, but the world will continue. People will get up, go to work, spend time with family and friends, share some laughs, tears, and experience much of the varying ups and downs of life. It will be our turn to cross the river, dividing the realm of the living from the realm of the dead. What awaits us beyond the veil is among the most contentious questions. For some, it's a matter of pure faith or it's purely science. For others, it's a blend of the two. But another question lingers. Is there more to death than what we think? We'll find out eventually, alone, when our death adds to the mystery. It's the final journey. Quite literally, it's the journey of a lifetime. A journey that, depending on who you ask, could land us anywhere or nowhere. A journey that could leave our shadow behind, lingering amongst the unknown forever. And you may remind one of the living, on occasion, of something important. You may no longer draw breath, but like all those who pass on, in one form or another, you still exist.
Hey partner, it's me, Detective Gavigan. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, SurfShark, a sleek and sexy VPN that just walked into your life. While a lot of people are terrified of ghosts, the real thing to be afraid of is bad people on the internet and protecting yourself from them with a VPN or virtual private network, and SurfShark is a heavyweight in that arena. I spent 6 months over the past few days investigating how many bad people are online. I determined that at least one is at any given time. But don't worry, SurfShark is gonna take a bite out of internet crime. And they're offering one hell of a deal. Hit my link below to surfshark.deal/Rob and enter code ROB, and they're gonna give you 83% off and 3 extra months free. Imagine all the beige trench coats and fedoras you can buy with that amount of savings. Surfshark always has your back. They use industry-leading measures to secure your data with the most secure VPN protocols and uncrackable encryption you can depend on. When you're tracking tracking a perp, the last thing you want is them to know where you're located. And with SurfShark's IP and DNS leak protection, no one's gonna find out where you parked the 30-year-old neglected car detectives like us drive. And they've got servers in numerous countries, so all you gotta do is connect to another country to be able to unlock things like streaming services that aren't available in your own country. And you can install SurfShark on most platforms like your phone, computer, smart TV, and more. Perfect for those extra long stakeouts outside of the strip club you're investigating for,
Reasons?
These virtual streets can leave any hard-boiled detective like us looking for backup. That's why SurfShark offers 24/7 customer support, and they don't log your data either, so you don't gotta worry about them hanging on to your top-secret confidential stuff that you're into. And you could try them risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. That rhymed. Nice. So again, head down to the description and hit up my link to surfshark.deals/Rob and enter code ROB to get their killer deal. And start protecting what's most important to you, your privacy. And when you try out the sponsors, you're directly helping me make more content. So I appreciate all of you who do. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe now and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what's next. And I'll see you next time.